8 years in, United States soldiers still working for CIA on the black operation in Syria. Yeah, I know, we're not supposed to know what's going on in Syria, but everybody knows. Everybody knows the thousands of U.S. soldiers that are on the ground in Syria. Officially, we don't have a number. Why? Because U.S. Congress still hasn't authorized use of force. 8 years into this conflict, how many American servicemen have lost their lives? How many non-American servicemen, and I mean non-servicemen, because they're working on a black operation that has never been approved by Congress? Oh, Steve, that was authorized by the sweeping global war on terrorism, where United States forces could pursue terrorists in any country of the world with as many resources as they want without any further congressional authorization. Well, friends, that is insane. Next, are we going to go to Moscow looking for terrorists? I mean, technically speaking, we don't need any more authorization to do that. What happens if they just decide that the people invading Eastern Europe, they're terrorists? So therefore, let's just send, several armored divisions into Eastern Europe to attack them and push them back. When you think about it that way, it's not really that far of a stretch from what we're doing in Syria. Now you say, Steve, it's just a small thing. It's not that big of a deal. Well, then why did Biden just last month expressly say that this is an operation to depose Bashar Assad, the president of Syria? 8 years in, billions and billions of dollars. We don't know how much because, once again, it's never been authorized. We do know the $1 billion, or at least that was earmarked for, the CIA program Timber Sycamore, which was totally designed to unseat Bashar Assad. Oh, I thought we were there just for ISIS, or ISIL, depending on how woke you are. If you want to be super friendly to the terrorists, then you just say ISIL, like the former president used to do all the time. Even though they're completely anti a lot of things woke people are for. I mean, when you look at what they were doing to people who were in the rainbow by murdering them and throwing them off buildings, I mean, why wouldn't you want to offend them? Anyway, so we have this program, this operation for 8 years to unseat the legitimate government of another country, expressly so. United States fighters and bombers regularly just move through their airspace with impunity. We have somewhere, best estimates are about 900 U.S. soldiers on the ground inside another country that does not want them there. And we have countless more people working for the CIA, working for mercenary groups. Yes, I know. United States using mercenary groups in a conflict in another country that we've invaded. I know, it just sounds so familiar, doesn't it? And you say, Steve, we haven't really done that much. 19,000, and this is months old, this number. 19,786 airstrikes. Now, if you consider how much it costs to operate the bombers and fighters that we use, that's expensive. Not even counting the ordnance that we dropped, but just the operation of the fighters and the bombers that we used. 19,786 airstrikes, and already it's above that. Now, I will grant you that about 16,000 of those airstrikes were targeting ISIS positions. And I use ISIS positions very loosely because the United States has used ISIS positions loosely. Look at the story of Raqqa. We considered the city of Raqqa as an ISIS position, and we flattened the city. 80% of the city was destroyed in U.S. airstrikes. 10,000 bombs dropped on the city of Raqqa. Friends, I know you've never heard this before. Or if you have, you've heard it from someone like me on the YouTubes or someone on the alternate media, because you never hear about this on the mainstream media. The fact that we've dropped more ordnance on Syria than Bear Country has dropped on Eastern Europe might have eluded you. And the United States has a history of dropping ordnance on civilians. Of course, it's always covered up. There was enough of a hubbub over a covered up airstrike where dozens of civilians were killed. So the U.S. Department of Defense did a review, and they reviewed and came up to the conclusion that even though it killed dozens and dozens of civilians, it was not against the policies. How many thousands of people were murdered by U.S. bombing of Raqqa? One may never know. Sort of like licking the inside of the lollipop. One may never know. Why? Because the United States has never done an investigation. The United States never investigates itself for war crimes. We've seen some taste of that when we've seen documents and videos released of U.S. airstrikes just murdering civilians casually out there on of course, anyone who leaks that immediately is branded an enemy of the United States and is either assassinated or is defamed publicly and basically imprisoned without trial or a sham trial. Just ask our friend over in the UK waiting extradition to the United States for WikiLeaks. Anyway, so what precisely makes the United States attack on Syria different than what Bear Country is doing? We've invaded without UN, it's not really a war, it's just a special operation. Oh yeah, well there's those bad guys over there that were murdering civilians, and so that's why we kind of went in and go take out those ISIS guys. Well, that sounds very familiar because that's a lot of the reasoning that Bear Country used to going into Eastern Europe, because there were bad guys murdering, their ethnicity people. People wearing all sorts of insignia that go back to World War II and the wrong side of World War II. Whole units that were raised up and were used basically by the government to attack civilians who were the wrong ethnicity. And so that was one of the major justifications that they went into those areas. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? The United States is flying drones over Syria, dropping bombs with impunity wherever they want to. We've armed people that are as bad as Al-Qaeda. Let's face it. A lot of the weapons that ISIS got were weapons that were given to them or given to allies of them by the U.S. forces. We have a history of giving the weapons to the wrong people, if you know what I mean. Now, granted, some of those weapons were captured in Iraq and moved over, but a lot of them weren't. A lot of them were weapons we gave them in order to overthrow Assad. In many ways, ISIS was created by a lot of these same CIA programs. So billions of dollars, who knows how many billions, hundreds of billions, I don't know. You don't know either. Maybe if Congress ever voted on it, we could maybe start figuring out. I mean, when we look at the Pentagon not able to account for its entire budget, every time they try doing an accounting thing, it just like everyone just raises their hands and goes, we don't know where the money went. We have no clue where the money went. Just give us more money. We don't know where it goes, but just give it to us. A lot of these black operations are funded through the shadow accounts and through black ops appropriations, and just who knows what's going on. We don't. How many death squads are roving about in Syria with no legal justification for them. I'm not necessarily saying those are United States death squads, but mercenary death squads that are funded by the CIA and local death squads that have been trained and funded. The United States would never do that. And yet we look through history and we see repeatedly again and again and again and again where we did that exact same thing. Look at the Contras. You look at the rationale that when we realize we're the good guys and everything we do, is morally justifiable, but that gets old. That gets old real fast, because if you ever look at the actions of the United States and the military-industrial complex and the NATO allies out there, and you look at the actions and you say, are these good actions or are these bad actions? You can see that they're illegal actions. We violate rules of war. We do whatever we want to do. And then we declare whole cities to be combat zones. Even Bear Country hasn't done that. Sure, we've seen a lot of startling images out of Eastern Europe where a fair bit of a city was damaged in fighting and such. But, there were troops on the ground, both sides there, fighting for over a year. Raqqa? Nope. No ground troops. No U.S. ground troops, no Allied ground troops there. We just flattened the city. 10,000 bombs. We did that kind of stuff in World War II. And yeah, I'm not saying ISIS is good in any way, shape, or form. They're some of the most evil people on the face of the earth. But my math kind of goes like this. If we drop 16,000 airstrikes, not bombs, airstrikes on ISIS, and almost 20,000 total, that means we did about 4,000 airstrikes directly on Syrian government forces. Does that sound like we're there for terrorism? Now, again, Bashar Assad is one of the more evilest peoples on the face of the earth. You could call him a little Hitler. Assad is twisted and evil and sick, and the things that he has done to uphold his regime are commensurate with what U.S.-backed dictators have done in the past and what evil people across the board have done for many years. Should he be deposed? You don't hear any disagreement from me. I have good friends, Syrians and such, that absolutely agree that he should be deposed and should be tried for his crimes. Him and his lieutenants and all the people under him who have committed war crimes. But that brings us back to the United States, waging an unsanctioned, unvoted on war in Syria. Are we ever going to have the conversation? Or are we just going to keep invading random countries whenever the person who's the president decides to do so? Yeah, this basically started under the Obama administration, and it was continued by the Trump administration, but towards the end of the Trump administration, he was trying to pull people out of Syria and end the thing and say it's done, let's get all our people out. And then, of course, the current administration was like, but there's oil there. But there's oil there. Yeah, that really gets us down to the true purpose of the invasion. And it also explains why they don't feel the need to take the rest of the country. But we already have the oil, so we can just kind of leave things be while we pump the oil and take all the oil, which is used to fund black operations all around the world. Yeah, we've seen this story before, but will there ever be any accountability for it? Will the United States ever have to pay for her crimes against the world? Will Congress ever hold any administration to task for violating the Constitution so willfully and so determinedly. I don't know, friends. But when I look at it, it's hard to see any difference between what's happening in Syria with us good guys and what's happening in Eastern Europe, except one of scale. There it is, friends. If you found this video to be useful or helpful and you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. Love to see you guys over there. God bless you all. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.